junior ministers, would-be ministers, never were and never will be ministers.
Don't forget the super. Don't forget the
Friends, it's a pleasure and an honour to have been invited here this evening by Shane Ross for the launch of Lou McDonald, a Republican Riddle. I was surprised, pleasantly so, when I got a call from Shane about 5 or 6 weeks ago. And I was equally surprised when he told me he'd written a biography of Lou McDonald. A most unlikely proposition, I would have thought. And he then explained that during his time on the Public Accounts Committee, he'd been friendly with Lou. Folks, having been through this book, if this is what a friend produces, you can finish the sentence for yourselves. Which is not to suggest that it is unfair. It is a work of rigour, a relentless work, a work of relentless scrutiny. The second thing that surprised me when Shane called that evening was that the launch would take place in Leinster House. Yes, he said, the Ceann Comhairle has agreed to it. That was presumably before Mr. O'Rourke was pulled aside by one of his Sir Humphreys and was told to hear the words, brave Ceann Comhairle, brave. But in any event, I think Donehy Nessbit is a far more appropriate location. I don't darken the door here very much now, as much as I used to in previous decades. But one of the last times I was here was in fact in the company of Lou McDonald on a Friday night that turned into a Saturday morning. It started in the Pearl Brasserie around the corner from here, close to the that famous Hotel de Marion, and it began with a very pleasant dinner organised by Neil O'Dowd of the Peace Process and Irish American Magazine and lots of other distinctions. He was organising a dinner for the benefit of Maureen Dowd, New York Times, Pulitzer Prize winning columnist, who was over here, and she just wanted to get a feel for the country ahead of doing an interview with Enda Kenny. And so a bunch of us assembled. We had a lovely dinner. There were people like hotelier John Fitzpatrick and another hotelier, John Pardy, a friend of mine, myself, O'Dowd, Lou, and the indefatigable Lise Hand made up the numbers. There might have been one or two more, but I can't remember. So Mo Dowd excused herself at an early hour, and then sometime later, a long time later, the rest of us repaired here to Nesbit's for a nightcap or four. And all I remember is, or half remember, is that Lou was good company and well able to hold her drink. In fact, she had matched the rest of us round for round from the off, and eventually I accepted an offer in desperation and sense of self-preservation and for health and safety reasons of a lift home from the non-drinking John Fitzpatrick. Lastly were Lou and Lise Hand, who Lise told me wondered to each other, what was it with these men that they just couldn't last the pace. So take it from me that whatever their political differences, Lou McDonald is right up there with Enda Kenny when it comes to stamina. And I can't think of a higher compliment in that sphere. But I've learned the hard way not to endorse or agree to launch books without having read the text, but I couldn't do that with Shane Ross, because I've owed him a serious favour for probably about 10 years now. He happens to live in one of the most beautiful houses in Enniskerry in County Wicklow, the house in which my father was born. The property went out of the O'Rourke family in the 1950s, unfortunately, but it has been lovingly looked after by subsequent owners, including Shane and Ruth, who bought it for, I think, a few modest million in the... he can tell us himself later. But anyway, about 10 years ago, a few of our family gathered up a few quid and we did up the old family grave, you know, which goes back, you know, into the previous century, in Curtistown, a few miles from Enniskerry, and there were a few Yanks over, and there was a gathering and a blessing ceremony, and coming up to the event, somebody said, wouldn't it be a lovely thing to visit the old seat of the O'Rourke family? Of course, said Shane when I phoned him. You'll be most welcome. How many of you will there be coming? And I said, oh, maybe about 7 or 8. I might have said maybe 1 or 2 more. But in any event, as it happened, 42 members of the extended O'Rourke family descended on Glenbrook and Enniskerry. Now Shane says we drank them out of Prosecco. I think it was Ruth's gorgeous elderflower wine or cordial. Perhaps we did both, but either way, we cleaned the place out. And the worst cut of all was, among the 42 of us, there wasn't a single vote in Shane's constituency. Nobody, not a single voter from Dublin South to near you're at down. So, I mean, it was purely an act of just self-sacrifice, generosity and hospitality, for which we are eternally grateful and for which I'm now paying. Glenbrook is a very fine piece of real estate, as I say, right beside Enniskerry village. Shane, as we know, has a keen eye for property values, and one of the many interesting chapters in this book is called The Mansion in Cabra. And he should be able to recognise them, I suppose, when he sees it. So, you know, that Ms. McDonald and her husband purchased for seemingly about €500,000 and then transformed into a home that is certainly at least twice the original size and worth probably a lot more than twice that amount. Now, we're not talking concealy here, but I suspect that Mary Lou McDonald and Sinn Fein, if they don't provide convincing answers to the questions this book asks about how that house has been funded, well then my media colleagues won't be prepared to accept the brush-offs that perhaps we accepted too readily from Charles Haughey about the source of his wealth. She and her supporters may well feel, and perhaps, you know, understandably, that some of the passages in this book, they will see them as encroaching on her private business, her family business, but unfortunately that is the way political life has become. And if it's not done sooner by way of explaining, you know, the background to that house, well, I think she's going to find herself repeatedly challenged to explain things, particularly the closer the election gets. Now, there may be perfectly good and credible answers to these questions, and as I often used to say to interviews in a previous life, there is no such thing as a bad question, only bad answers. It didn't cut much ice with Donald Trump, by the way, if I asked him. Whether his hair was real, but that's another story for another occasion. There is, coming back to this, a wealth of material that gives new insights and background on a leader who may well be Ireland's first woman Taoiseach, or Ireland's first Sinn Féin Taoiseach. You know, aside from dealing with the mansion, as I say, it dispels some what might be described as well-known facts, quote-unquote, about Mary Lou McDonald's upbringing, difficulties in her family as she grew up, the ups and downs of her father's personal and professional life. Yes, she did live in a big house in well-heeled Rathgar, but what emerges from this book is they didn't own it, they were renting a flat in it. And that is, I say, a little-known fact, but it's, you know, it's one of the many interesting things that feature and that emerge from this book. It charts her move to Fianna Fáil in the constituency of Dublin West, where she became friendly with a lifelong Fianna Fáil activist, Nora Comiskey, who in Shane's words is way out on its Republican wing, an untouchable maverick within Fianna Fáil. Nora had strong links with Sinn Féin figures like Joe Cahill, Martin McGuinness and Gerry Adams. She became Mary Lou's minder and mentor, ultimately suggesting to her that she was in the wrong party. Though interestingly, we read that the late Brian Lenihan wanted her to remain with Fianna Fáil, as did some of his supporters in the party. Meanwhile, we learned that her sister Joanne MacDonald would throw her lot in with the even more hardline Republican group called Irigi, and that's a very interesting story in its own right. We read how Mary Lou McDonald caught the eye of Gerry Adams, who promoted and protected her right up to her succession to the presidency 3.5 decades after Adams and his supporters had eased out Rory O'Brady at the head of Sinn Féin. Despite the strong support from the party establishment, it wasn't all plain sailing for Mary Lou McDonald. Failed attempts to get elected to Dáil Éireann, election to the European Parliament followed by the loss of her seat, countless trips up and down the country to address party members, and finally making it to Dáil Éireann in the tsunami that cleared out most of Fianna Fáil in 2011. A Star Takes the Dáil by Storm is the title of that chapter, and I think anybody, friend or foe, who's been watching Mary Lou McDonald would say, yes, she is a political star. She is, as they say, she's box office. There's really good detail here on the funeral she attended, the coffin she carried, helping to build her credentials in Sinn Féin. memorial events including the attendance at the Seán Russell statue in Fairview Park, an IRA leader who hoped that Hitler would win World War II and get the Brits out of Ireland. So they put her through a lot of Republican hoops, and she jumped through them with little hesitation. According to Shane Ross, it was long the intention of Gerry Adams that he would be succeeded by Mary Lou McDonald against the background of his own, let's say, presentational difficulties, at least they would be seen as that in this state, with the Sinn Féin response to shameful events in which the party or its associates have been implicated. The kidnapping and murder of the mother of 10, Jean McConville, the rape of Maria Cahill, the kidnapping and brutal murder of Paul Quinn in South Armagh, the Liam Adams paedophile case. The list is not short. One thing that perplexes me about this book and the writing of it is how Mary Lou McDonald and Sinn Féin brought the shutters down on any kind of cooperation with Shane. You know, Sinn Féin and he's not the only one to get this treatment. I mean, could it be that, like, it was initially the requests for cooperation were welcomed with, yeah, we'll be back to you. You know, yeah, of course we'll talk to you. These were people he would have worked in the scene and in the Dáil and Dáil committees and so forth. But a pattern emerged. Requests for cooperation, for insights. They met with positive responses initially, and then turning to evasion, non-cooperation and total exclusion. I mean, could it be that they didn't see any point in helping that this West Brit stockbroker type with a strong track record of heaping criticism and scorn on their every move in the pages of the Sunday Independent and elsewhere? But he's not the only one to get the cold shoulder. That lack of openness, you know, it has been directed as well at another journalist who, I think she's here this evening, she was earlier anyway, another journalist from a well-known family in Derry has been similarly cold-shouldered. Sinn Féin has made clear to Aoife Moore of the Sunday Times, previously of the Examiner, that she will get no cooperation in the writing of her book on the modern Sinn Féin. Now, I'm glad to know that she hasn't let it deter her, and she's well on the way to completing the project. But this lack of openness, this omertà, it is deeply disconcerting. What does it tell us about what we might expect from Sinn Féin in government? How would the party set out about controlling its message, say, not just in its day-to-day dealings with media, but in its appointments to sensitive positions in the governance of broadcasting, for example, or the media generally? It wasn't today or yesterday that a Sinn Féin figure explained to me, and trying to be helpful, I would accept, that a good rule of thumb in assessing what one might be told in dealing with people from that quarter was to bear in mind that them that says don't know and them that knows don't say. That may have been an understandable approach during the Troubles, why that kind of caution was exercised. And, you know, in fairness, the Republicans did run and have always run an efficient media operation showing cooperation and a friendly face, where perhaps their loyalist counterparts back in the day would have been more hostile and threatening. But surely now there is no need for this deep-seated control freakery, I think it can be called. On the other hand, perhaps a Sinn Féin party in government will turn out to be models of transparency. It remains to be seen. A forlorn hope, perhaps. But on page 250 of this book, Shane quotes his former colleague in government, Brendan Howland, as saying Mary Lou McDonald genuinely supported freedom of information changes. And last year, Sinn Féin did bring forward a bill to widen the scope of the legislation, so we'll see. Watch what they do, not what they say, I suppose. Shane, you may have a bestseller on your hands. I hope you do, though there will be stiff competition from my good friends Tommy Gorman, whose book was launched last night, and Charlie Bird, whose book is being launched next week, not forgetting, I suppose, Bono, and Steve Collins, whose book launch some of us will be going along to later this evening. Reading Republican Riddle reminded me of another book that got little cooperation in the writing, Bandit Country, the IRA and South Armagh by Toby Herndon. They did little to help write it, but they sure as hell wanted to read it. And the suggestion was that there wasn't a home in South Armagh that didn't have a copy of it hidden somewhere. And I suspect something similar may happen to this book. But it won't be just bought by Sinn Féin people. It'll be bought by their opponents at the election, Yes, they will find ammunition, pardon the phrase, but it won't be enough to derail what now seems to be the unstoppable advance of Sinn Féin towards becoming the largest party in All Ireland. Say what you like about their populism, their cynicism, their opportunity, all traits, let's face it, which wouldn't be unknown to parties of other hues and politicians of other hues. But Sinn Féin is a serious outfit. We all know that. We've seen how they can ruthlessly sideline members, even elected ones, who don't perform up to expectation. They use their resources carefully and meticulously. They prepare for engagement seriously and professionally. They are well trained in the schools of hard neck and hard knocks. And they're well ahead of their rivals in the use of social media platforms. They learn from their mistakes. I mean, there was a feature in the Irish Times recently. They carried a quote from one close observer saying, "We're a long way from the Barry McElduff days where someone did their own social media for weeks leading up to something catastrophic." A reference there to an MP who was forced to resign after tweeting a picture of himself with a Kingsmill sliced pan on his head on the anniversary of one of Northern Ireland's worst sectarian atrocities. It may be over 2 years away, but even now one can confidently forecast that Mary Lou McDonald will be the central figure in the next general election campaign. Out meeting and greeting in the towns and villages and shopping centres, generating the kind of buzz and momentum that we saw, in the late 70s with Jack Lynch, in the 90s with Bertie, with Garrett Fitzgerald in the early 80s. That's what we can most assuredly expect. It's going to be an interesting contest, an intense contest, and people participating in it, analysing it and observing it could do an awful lot worse than to buy and read and study this autobiography.
Very much indeed, Seán. And I don't think I'm alone in saying, I hope that's not the last time we hear of you. I hope we hear you back on the airwaves very, very soon. That's another issue which I don't intend to indulge myself this evening, but I think it's one which has got to be settled, and it was a disgraceful episode in the history of RTE, partly because of the inconsistencies involved, but also because of the punitive nature of what happened. And it's something I think more people should talk about and have the courage to talk about. Because Seán was extremely badly treated. I'm privileged to be here tonight to listen to him and to say, no, we're going to hear him again and again and again. We're going to welcome him. There was a time I wouldn't have said that. Especially when you were a minister. I'll come to that. The truth of the matter is, of course, I was going to thank everybody, and Seán's the last person I'm going to thank this evening, because I think next time he comes to launch a book, he should launch a book of fiction and do what he had to say about his gathering at our house 13 years ago. His memory is fairly. It is true. He did come around, having begged me when he come back. He did. Ruth answered the bell at the door, and she said, "Hi, Seán." And he said, "Seán O'Rourke, you're expecting me." I think I told him. She said, "How many of you are there?" And he said 43, actually. And they came in and they dragged us out of the house. And it was all Prosecco, not elsewhere. But I was being a politician at the time, and Seán O'Rourke is a powerhouse, right? He's a political powerhouse. If he comes to your door and says, "I want a drink," you say yes, don't you? You say, "Yeah, okay, let them in, let them all in." So we let them all in. They were very nice people, very nice family. But I have to be honest about this. I put it in my back pocket and said, "There'll be a payback for this." And it wasn't tonight I was thinking of. I was thinking of, this was 1930, going on a show. And Seán has got a reputation, most of you here will know, of being a pretty penetrating, fearful interrogator. And I put it in my pocket, and I didn't go on the show for a while because I wanted to hold him as for a time when I was in difficulties. I thought it was a good idea that I'd get a soft ride out of Seán. So when I became a minister, Seán was pestering me to go on his program time and time and time. And I wouldn't go on, and he was taunting me. And he was going on the air, and he was saying, oh, come on, Shane Ross won't come out to play, right, as they do. And I wouldn't come out to play. But then I said I'd wait till I get into a bit of trouble. I didn't take long. As a minister. And there was an issue which some of you must remember called Wesley College. Of which I was blameless, but it wasn't just you. Many of you out there who persecuted me. I did it very well. But my advisors, that's what you said to me that day. My advisors, both of whom are here today, Carol Hunt and Ashley Dunn, and I'm very glad to see them, said to me, don't go on the Seán O'Rourke show. They said, you're going to have to go out and explain this, but don't go on the Seán O'Rourke show. And I didn't tell them, I don't think. I had it in my pocket, I was okay. So eventually, I decided of all the people who were pestering me to beat me, I'd go on the Seán O'Rourke show. Which is great, I went in, confident. This is my way out of trouble. He owed me. I went into the studio, and Seán said, oh, hi, Shane. I go, you okay? I said, fine. How's the family? He said, fine. I said, how's yours? He said, we must come out to your house again shortly. And I then said, I kind of felt like a family member, actually, by the time the interview started. It was extraordinary. I have never in my life had a worse time. Beat me up around and about the place. I felt so guilty. And then, when I thought it was over, I said, I was getting up to go, and he said, hold on a minute. He said, well, there are a few questions here. And I said, who from? He said, the public. We're opening a public telephone. And half the nation, because it was about sports grass, came in to complain about the fact that they hadn't got sports grass and how bad and unfair I had been. And that was my experience of Seán O'Rourke. Now,
that never happened to me.
I'm sure it is. I remember, because I was looking at my text, I remember where my staff were texting through to me, giving me the answers to the questions distinctly. Anyway, what this does tell me, though, and it's a serious point, is that he's a great broadcaster. That he can separate, and he has absolutely no hesitation whatsoever in coming around and accepting your hospitality, generous as it was, and then beating you up the next day. And that's something which a good journalist should be able to do. And I wasn't too happy when I left the studio that day, I have to admit. But I do appreciate that something good journalists do. And when he said, it's a serious point about this book, that, yeah, I was certainly a friend of Mary Lou McDonald. I had a really good relationship. But, and when I told her I was going to do this book, I don't think she was happy because she didn't want a book being done. But it was a very civilized conversation we had. And I wanted her to help out with the book in only one way. I didn't want to be an authorized biography. I wanted to help out with the book by introducing me to her family and friends, so they talk to me and make life easier for me and give me some good stories. And she said no. And I had a difficulty then. She came back after about a week and said, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't understand your way. But I then had to go and approach people in a way which was a somewhat different attitude, because I was digging and I was looking for something. And I did have to separate my feelings for her, which are still very warm, by the way, very warm indeed, with what I was finding out, which was something which she didn't probably want to see published. And I have to make a choice then. And I decided, yeah, it goes down. I committed to Claire and others to writing a book about somebody I know. I can't say, sorry, I like it too much. I can't put that in if it's a good story and if it's relevant to our political life or political decisions. So what I did was, and what you see there, is try and produce what was a balanced book with good and bad in it. Stuff they don't want to see and stuff they do want to see. And I think you'll find when you read it, if you read it, that there's a lot of both in it. And it does certainly trace our political life in a very critical way. But I also am absolutely clear that when I was on the PAC with her, she was, as Seán said, she was a superstar. And it wasn't just that she was a drama actor. She was penetrating, she was forensic, she was really good at asking questions. She was really good at making people account for things. Now, it may be partly because there was no republicanism. There was none of that issue on the Public Accounts Committee. That never arose. It's not a political, it's certainly not theory. It's not a political committee. It's a committee where you make people account for what they do. And Mary Lou was superb at that. She's a great speaker, she's a great orator. But she was absolutely superb at also making people account for what they do. But it also forced me to do something quite unusual, I suspect, in biographies. I had to go actually going knocking on doors, which is a very old style of journalism. I had to literally go out there and knock on people's doors and say, look, I'm doing a biography. Mary Lou McDonald. In some cases it was people who knew her very, very well. And they were very helpful, in fact. And I spoke to, and there's absolutely no doubt about it, I spoke on the record and off the record to members of her family who were very, very helpful. And it has to be said, in the main, they were very supportive of her, which is what to be expected of a family. There's stories from that in the book all over the place. But there are three questions, which are the main questions, which are always asked about Mary Lou, and we've tackled them in the book as much as we can, and I think we found solutions to some of them. How come that somebody from such a background ended up in such a position? Does it tell you something about her? Or does it tell you something about Irish society? Does it tell you anything about Sinn Fein? Because she did come from, as Seán said, a well-off background in South Dublin. She was well educated. She was private school educated. She did go to Trinity. The second question is, why was it take so long for her to become a Republican? She was about 28 when that happened. That question is addressed. She says it was because she had what she calls a road to Damascus moment in 1981, when at the time of the hunger strikes. But she did nothing about republicanism at all until about 17 years later. And she went through her education during that period, she went to Trinity during that period, where the openings for politics are absolutely legion. There are so many, but she had no interest whatsoever. Something happened, and I think it's apparent in the book, during that period which brought her very rapidly on the road she had made. And the third thing is, I suppose, and it's a fundamental question, is she a true believer? Is she a careerist? A true believer? Now the indications probably are a bit both, but there is certainly serious evidence that she was a true Republican for a long period of her time in Sinn Féin. She stuck by indefensible positions for so long that I think she must have been very committed to the cause. But there are doubts about whether this was a career move or not. That is a question which is tackled in the book as fundamental questions. So, and it obviously goes into a lot of her life, her family, which is unknown. Her father is a particularly colourful and interesting character, and that is in the book. I just want to thank you all for coming here and showing an interest. I know that this is a fascinating person, and I think she's the most fascinating person in Irish politics at the moment, and I think that's what's sparked a large amount of interest. I'd like to thank particularly those who have been believers in this project from the beginning, who didn't think it was a strange thing to be doing a biography of someone who's never held political power at all, and may never do so. That in particular, I'd like to mention my agent, Jonathan Williams, who I went to first with the idea, and he was very, very supportive. Our publishers, Atlantic, Will Atkinson, Claire Drysdale, and Karen Duffy, who did the publicity. I particularly like to thank Simon Hess, Gil Hess, who's been immensely supportive over the last two books. The last one was called Embedded in the Blue Shirts, which Stephen Collins should actually be doing a few tours down the road. I'd like to thank, I suppose more than anybody, Seamus Haughey. Seamus Haughey is he was lucky. Seamus Haughey was leaving Leicester House at the same time as I was. He was lucky, he left voluntarily. I was lucky because he was available. He was the chief researcher in the library. and he was available to do research on this particular book. And whereas people are very complimentary about about the research of this book, I can say unequivocally that 99% of it was done by somebody else who never get the credit. Because I think, that is something which is to be borne in mind, because good researchers are hard to find, and he was also an ex-civil servant who didn't mind being working or run after 5:30 in the evening. I'd like to particularly thank him. I'd like to thank you, Brave Books. And I'd also like to congratulate Alan English of the Sunday Independent for having fantastic judgment for last weekend's. The Sunday Independent has been very supportive of this project and has obviously identified it as something which has a great deal of public interest. But it is really wonderful to see a newspaper which is prepared to put the money where their mouth is, say this is a good project, this is worth support. And they actually did put that back into it in a really meaningful way last week. And I'd like to thank Alan very much indeed for doing that. It's a tremendous achievement for the Independent. It's a great tribute to yourselves and to Jodie Corcoran as well, who's tolerated me for so long on his pages that I don't know whether he's going to do much longer, but thank you very much indeed. But finally, I'd just like to say thank you all for coming here this evening. It is really nice to see faces who are friendly, faces who have persecuted me in the past, but faces who are very welcome here this evening, and particularly to Seán O'Rourke, who's a fantastic speaker, a fantastic speaker.
Please buy books, the bar is open, there's food coming. Don't feel like you have to run to Stephen Collins straight away, because we will feed you but please buy books. Thank you very much.
So, no doubt some of you are probably wondering what on earth I was doing at the book launch of Mary Lou McDonald, A Republican Riddle by Shane Ross. Well, the simple explanation for my attendance is that I was invited. And I was invited because I am mentioned in the book. I was first contacted by former Minister Ross in August 2021 after he had read a blog in the Pensive Quill that I had written in 2016. And as he states in the book, I had some choice words to write about Sinn Fein and Mary Lou. Ross told me that he was thinking of writing a book about MacDonald and wanted to know more about her time on the National Executive of the Irish National Congress after she was co-opted as a member in 1998. The Irish National Congress, or the INC for short, was a nationalist lobby group that promoted constitutional republicanism through the ideals of freedom, unity and peace. I was a member of the INC's National Executive from 1993 to 2010. In 2000 I was the PRO, as well as the Vice Chair of the INC, and MacDonald was the Chair. And for most of that time she was a member of Fianna Fáil, until she was headhunted by Sinn Féin. Ross wanted to know if I thought MacDonald was a true believer or a career politician, and no prizes for guessing what my answer was to that question. Ross asked me if I could verify some dates regarding MacDonald's involvement in the INC, and I told him that I could, as I had all the minutes of the INC's National Executive meetings and correspondence from 1991 to 2010. He thanked me for my time, and I didn't hear from him again until November 2021, when he texted me to ask if he could see the minutes and correspondence that related to MacDonald. I agreed, and on Monday, the 13th of December 2021, he called to my home and spent the day at my kitchen table poring over the documents. I found him to be a very pleasant man with a good sense of humour. He certainly took the roasting I gave him about being the most oppressed man in Ireland, which is what I used to sarcastically refer to him as in my many unpublished letters to the editor back in the 90s. And he was honest enough to admit that as a Southern Protestant, he never once felt oppressed or discriminated against because of his religious background. Much of my contribution to his book are extracts from my blog, including my detailing of Mary Lou McDonald's attempts on behalf of Sinn Féin to cancel an INC anti-sectarian protest. In May 2000, following a unanimous vote by the National Executive, the INC had decided to protest the civic endorsement of sectarian hatred by the then Dublin Lord Mayor, Labour's Mary Freehill. She had invited the Orange Order to march in Dublin and attend the unveiling of a plaque to commemorate the founding of their anti-Catholic sectarian organisation. Shortly after the INC vote, MacDonald and I were invited to meet with Sinn Féin representatives. They informed us that they were aware of our intentions and didn't think that our protest should go ahead, claiming that it would be marred by violence, which would make us look bad. We disagreed and told them that the protest would be happening. However, following that meeting with Sinn Féin, MacDonald had started ringing around the other members and managed to convince the majority of the executive to call off the protest. At the time, she was secretly a member of Sinn Féin, and I was the only INC executive member that she had told. I did my own ring around and convinced everyone to take part. Of course, I felt I had no option but to reveal Mary Lou's membership of Sinn Féin to the other members. I presented Mary Lou with two options: either resign as chair or lead us in protest. She chose the latter, and in Dawson Street, Dublin, on the 28th of May 2000, Mary Lou made her national and international television debut. Here's what RTE News reported on the day.
It was low-key. No one from the Orange Order, North or South, attended, at least not officially, and that much to the consternation of the Mayor of Ballymoney. He did turn up. He felt they should have. After all, Dublin's first citizen was commemorating the first meeting of the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland, held here in Dawson Street just over 200 years ago. Today's unveiling was to have coincided with the first Orange March in the capital in 60 years. It proved controversial. It was cancelled. As the Lord Mayor arrived today, so did 20 or so protesters from the Irish National Congress, headed by a banner reminiscent of Orange marches, but that's where the similarity ended.
Mary Freehill and other public representatives would really want to get to grips with their responsibility under the Good Friday Agreement, which is to champion the right of people to live free from sectarian harassment.
Everybody has a right to protest, and I'm not denying them their right. But, you know, I think we're all challenged these days to make space for everybody else and to try to create better understanding.
But given the apparent controversy, one reporter asked her, how long did she think the plaque would remain in place?
Let's be positive.
Roisin Duffy, RTE News.
Typical RTE reporting, underestimating the size of our protest. We actually had over 50 members present on the day, and 20 of them were holding placards. And even though we hadn't publicly advertised the protest, we still outnumbered those that were there to support Freehill's civic endorsement of sectarian hatred. RTE also neglected to mention the support we had from one Dublin City Councillor. Former INC Vice Chair Finian McGrath stood with us on the day. In the book, I recall Sinn Féin's failed attempt to scupper Finian's chances of becoming a TD in 2002. Despite their underhanded efforts, Finian would go on to get elected to the Dáil, serving 4 terms as an independent TD. His final term saw him in government when he was appointed Minister for State for Disability Issues and given the right to attend cabinet meetings. Finian retired from electoral politics in 2020, but continues to be politically active. Finian also attended the book launch, and it was great to catch up with him after all these years. He told me that he was very surprised to learn that I had spoken to Ross. He had assumed that because of our political differences, I would have told him to get lost. I reminded Finian that when we were in the INC, we never told anyone to get lost. We spoke to everyone and anyone. Indeed, inside the INC, many of us disagreed on a variety of issues. I wouldn't agree with Finian on a lot of things, but what brought us together was our shared goals of freedom, unity and peace. Setting aside differences to achieve shared objectives is how to get things done. Closer to home, this is the same approach I took with my community activism over the years. These wouldn't have become these if I had told councillors and officials to get lost because I didn't like their politics and was opposed to their views on other issues. Ross had contacted me because he had read my blog and wanted to know more. I was happy to engage with him and help him with his research and the verification of facts. I'll leave a link to the blog in the description, which you can read for free. If you want to read the book, however, you'll have to pay €20.99, which is what I had to pay for my copy on the night. Or you could save a few bob and purchase the book online for €16.99. I'll leave a link in the description. You'll find me in Chapter 3, on pages 100 to 106. I also had to pay for my own pints, but there was free wine if you were so inclined, and of course the elite cuisine of onion rings, cocktail sausages, chicken wings and chips were also free. When asked by Ross why I wasn't staying the night, I reminded him that not all of us were millionaires or had the disposable income that comes with a ministerial pension. I really enjoyed my time at the book launch and I had a number of very interesting conversations. I would love to make a more detailed video about it, and maybe one day I will, once I've cleared my backlog of unfinished projects. So be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new and hit the bell for notifications so you won't miss any of my irregular and eclectic content. I have yet to read the book from cover to cover, but from what I have read of it so far, I think it is safe to say that it is well written and well researched, and I wish Seán the very best of luck with it. Until the next time, be seeing you.